All right, let's keep going here. So, even your professors can make mistakes. So originally I had this in a different room and I went there and forgot to switch. So, now I get things going. Right away, you'll notice I opened up Zoom. So I think I have this in the slides later on, but basically every class, I'll just start recording. That doesn't mean I think about this at all. So if I walk around, might not get a very good audio. Anything I do that's off of this, slide won't get recorded, but you have to miss class in perfect, substitute. So those will always be up on the YouTube playlist. So I'll mention a little bit more about that, but in case you see kind of Zoom running in the background, that's why I have it. So we'll just kind of take a look here at Canvas. I've already started to get things kind of organized. We've got week one here, a bunch of different files. Every week, I'll kind of put up that module or that week's materials. So you can kind of see here, we've got the syllabus today. I got the slides. I always put up these outlines, which kind of go through the concept points that we'll cover that week. I'll then put assignments in a separate tab, and then we will start to have weekly quizzes, which I'll talk more about here in a second. So I try to have this kind of organized pretty nicely on Canvas for you. And we kind of repeat that pattern every single week. If I didn't introduce myself already, I'm Professor Lantis. So I've been here, this will be my fourth year at IU. I was over at, for those of you from Indiana, I was over at Ball State University for about 8 years. So I've taught this course a decent amount, right? So the title it has here is the fundamentals of economics for business, right? Most of you, how many of you are Kelly students? A lot of you, right? So has a slightly different spin on it. We'll try to kind of relate more of our examples to the business related topics. But really, you can take fundamentals of economics and apply them to. So one of the things that I do some research on is sports economics. Right? So you can apply them really to anything that you're interested in. Right? So today, we'll kind of go over the syllabus a little bit. I've got it summarized in the slides. If you want to go through it a little bit more in detail, the Word document is up there on Canvas. But, just to kind of get some of the stuff out of the way, we will have a required text for this class. It's going to be an e-text. I actually had to resync it this morning because of late ads, late withdrawals. So I'll show you how we can access that website here in a little bit. But if you had already registered for it, you're going to have to go back and register again. So I apologize for that, but because of the change in class rosters, I had to resync it. And I think some of you that had registered before, it's going to kick you out and make you kind of sign back in. If you have any questions on that, you can ask me after class or send me an email. So this e-text we're going to end up using for these weekly module readings. Okay, so you do have to have the book. Now, the other thing that you'll need in class, Canvas website, but on top of that, you need to have some device. I would suggest a laptop or an iPad. You technically use your phone, but every single class, except for this first week, we're going to have daily in-class quizzes. So it's my way of kind of taking attendance or giving some points for attendance, but also it's like these mini checks as we're covering material to make sure you're understanding, right? So you will need some type of device that can access. So I'll do these quizzes through Canvas. So you just need something that can access Canvas. Okay? So it's your preference or what you want. This room, I don't love these desks. They're a little bit small, right? But if you do have a laptop that fits comfortably, use that or whatever device is your preference. I put up some suggested materials. I'm not going to go through these because most people won't use them. It's just some outside resources. So here's kind of a link to a bunch of different microeconomics books or kind of old courses. It's helpful, but anything that I expect you to know will be in that e-text or in the slides. So it's good additional material if you want something else, if you kind of exhaustive, that e-text and what we covered in class, but it's not required, and I don't necessarily expect that you're working on. When it comes to the exams, so I put in the homework, you'll need a calculator, but I think most of you would have that accessible to you outside of class. But for the exams in the midterm, you will need a calculator in class. And guess what? That can't be on your phone, right? So you need an actual physical calculator. The most it can be is a scientific calculator. So no graphing calculators, because I know you can like record notes and things like that on there. So a non-graphing calculator is what you can use on the midterm and fine. Okay. And then I'll post kind of skeleton slides every week on Canvas. So I say skeleton, It's most of the material that we'll cover in class. I leave a couple things out just so that if you're not in class, you wouldn't have like everything that we covered. Once again, creating a little bit of incentive for you guys to show up here. And so I'll put up the skeleton slides, and then we'll fill some missing parts in during class. I already mentioned every class, I'll just have Zoom running in the background. I'll post these to, of course, YouTube. So I think I got the link up here. I've got 3 sections this semester, so it really doesn't matter which one you go to. We cover the same material. But this section, like when I mentioned due dates, you guys are on a different time. So I'd be Monday, Wednesday, some of my other sections are Tuesday, Thursday. So you can watch any of the recordings, but I'll mention things in the other classes which are specific to Tuesday, Thursdays. This is the only one that you should be watching this section. Or instead of using this link, you don't want to go back to week 1 slides every week. Just search for Professor Lantis on YouTube. I think I'm the first one that comes up. Okay. Also, I can get going on a roll. My wife would say, like, I start talking, I don't shut up. So if you ever have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, stop me. Make sure we're getting everything pretty clear today. Kind of start out with what the expectations will be. And I'll try to remind myself to pause. So what do you guys care about, right? So how are you going to get the grade that you want in this class, right? Or the grade that Kelly's telling you to need, essentially, right? So this class is pretty heavily weighted on exams, okay? So we're going to have 3 exams, 2 midterms and a final. And so each midterm is what, 23%. The final, we're going to have a few more questions than the midterms. We also have, I think, 2 hours as the time block instead of an hour and 15 minutes, which is in class. The midterms will be in class. Okay? So a few more questions, a little bit longer of time. It's going to be weighted a little bit more, 28 instead of 23%. All right. We're also going to have weekly Canvas quizzes. So that every single week, we're basically going to cover a different, what we call, I'm going to call it a module. Okay? So the only exception to this is after the first midterm, I'm going to combine module 5 and 6. So these modules kind of pop up, they kind of coincide with what you see on Top Hat. So every single week, whatever module we're covering that week, we're going to have a quiz assigned kind of after our Wednesday class, and then do before we, do at the end of the day on that Monday follow. I've got this in a separate slide, but just kind of mentioning it here. Now you'll notice the Canvas quiz, it's weighted about half of what a midterm is. So these are important, right? Because you get to take these outside of class. You have all your resources available to you, notes, technically, web, although I'll mention something about that in a second. So not as much as the exam, but a good way that in case you don't do as well as you want in the exam to kind of help boost your grade. Canvas discussions. So we're going to have these, about 5 of these throughout the semester. I'll go through them more in depth in a second. But you can kind of see 8% here, not quite as much of the quizzes, but these are going to be primarily participation based. Guys, this is a good way to make sure you're getting, I shouldn't call them easy or hard points, but easier points than you're going to be able to get on the exam. And then every single class, I never mentioned this, we're going to have these in-class quizzes that I do through Canvas. They look like they're a pretty small percent of your overall grade, but Kelly standards matter. And I have many students who start missing these. You're on that cutoff of a B to a B plus. Getting all the points in this category can kind of help bump you up there, right? So it's not going to get you an A if you had a C, right? When you're on that cutoff, it's really important you do all of it. So you show up in class, get all of these points. And I know it looks, or sorry, I went out of order. This is 4%, right, where those in-class quizzes. So it can really make a difference. Now, the other area where it's easy to get points, every week we're going to have these module readings. So the goal that I have with these is really just to prime your brain for the material we're going to cover that week. So we'll talk about the due dates here in a second, but essentially they're going to be assigned before we cover that material in class. So these are our different categories. Hopefully with the numbers you can see, the exams are really important. Right? They're going to carry a lot more weight of your overall grade. So going through each one, okay. So going through each one of these categories a little more in depth, right? The 2 midterms, I have the dates up here and they're in the syllabus. They're going to be on a Thursday, right? So both these dates are Thursday in class. So make sure you're looking at your schedule right now and make sure you don't have any conflicts with these dates. So these exams will be in class. They're all multiple choice, 25 questions. Graded for correctness. Are you going to answer correct or you don't? Same thing with the final, except for instead of 25, we'll have 30 questions. And it's going to have The final is going to look a little bit different, and I'll talk more about that when we get closer to it, but it's an assigned date from the university. And actually, all my sections will have the exact same time. So we'll coordinate that, what room that is in, but it likely won't be in this room. Okay, so we'll get to that as we kind of get closer to the end of the semester. But once again, it will be at this date and time. So start looking at your calendars as the semester progresses. If you have a conflict with this, you need to get to me as soon as possible. That would apply to both of the midterm dates as well. It's always easier for me to make arrangements a week, 2 weeks prior to the exam, as opposed to you let me know the day of, right? Actually, you let me know the day of, I can't make adjustments, right? So let me know if you have conflicts with these dates as soon as you move them. So diving into each one of these categories.
Are the final exams comprehensive?
Good question. So exams in this class are going to only be over the previous 4 modules we covered. So they're not cumulative, right? So like exam 1 is 1 through 4 modules 1 through 4. Exam 2 is modules, we combine 5 and 6 there. So that one's 5 through 9, but really 5 and 6 we kind of treat the same module. And then the last final will be over modules 10 through 13. Now, I say it's not cumulative. I'm not going to go back and ask module 2 type questions, but I always say that it's comprehensive in that things we learn in module 3, we will literally use the rest of the semester, right? So everything builds on itself in this class. So they're not cumulative. I'm not going to ask you module 3 type questions on the exam, but you need to know those concepts in order to be able to answer questions from modules 11 and 12. Is that? Yep. So I kind of mentioned earlier, we're going to have a module quiz every single week. That's a total of 12. We've got 13 modules. I combine 2 of them to get this 12 different kind of quizzes. So I will post them. I put up Wednesday after class here. Change some things. I think it'll benefit you guys, right? So instead of posting it after class on Wednesday, I want to keep you in line with my other sections, which I have on Tuesday, Thursday. Also something I'll talk about later, which are some collaborative learning sessions. So the quiz for this class, instead of being posted right after, I'm going to post it the following day at 4 o'clock. So you'll have 24 hours after we cover that material. You'll then see the quiz pop up on Canvas. So once you start these quizzes, you have 60 minutes to complete them. There's no pausing the clock, right? Once you sit down to take it, make sure you have that next 60 minutes carved out to be able to take that quiz. So they're always going to be due at the end of the day on Monday. It's kind of weird because we have class on Monday. So I would maybe not suggest waiting until Monday to take it, but if you want to, you will have that flexibility. Okay? Which if you want the full 60 minutes, it's not start the exam by the due date. That means you have to have it submitted by that due date and time. So if you want the full 60 minutes, you need to start it on Monday by 10:59. Late quizzes, there's no kind of like percent deduction, but you submit a quiz late, it's a 0. So these due date and times, that applies to everything in this class, very important to keep on top of those. Now what I will do at the end of the semester is, even though we have 12 of these quizzes, I'll drop your lowest 2. Right? Now this change doesn't occur on Canvas in terms of impacting your grade until we get to the end of the semester. So you can kind of think about it, if you don't do well on one of these quizzes, it's always kind of like a worst case scenario on Canvas, because your 2 lowest scores will end up getting dropped at the end of the semester. All right. So, you know, kind of take the percent of the overall grade, divide that by 10, kind of think about this as there's 1,000 points in the class, 120 of them come from these quizzes. Each one, if I had 10 counting, would then be like worth 12 points. And that's how they'll show on Canvas. Questions? So I mentioned these Canvas discussions earlier. They're going to be about every 2 to 3 weeks, and we're going to have 5 of them throughout the semester. So, you know, it's a little bit weird in terms of how the weighting is. It's not nice and easy, but it's 1.6% for each assignment. So the way, have you guys done discussion board things in other classes prior? You know, if you're a freshman in high school, or you see a lot of head nods. So I'm going to use it a little bit differently, probably than other professors have used or teachers have used for you. All right. So the requirements are going to be, I give you like this initial prompt and set of questions. You post your response to that. That's like, what do I have here? 8 points. Right? will then respond to two other students' responses to my original prompt, each one of those being worth 4 points. So the way this is going to look a little bit different. So once I assign these, I put up here, they're generally available for a week. Usually it's closer to 2 weeks from when I post them to when they're due. And I don't have like hard set due dates. It kind of depends on what we're covering in class. And I try to like everything in this class, I have due dates, but I sometimes will be flexible depending on where the discussion in class goes. But if you look at the syllabus, it has kind of a week by week outline. It kind of mentions these as Canvas discussion number 1, 2, 3. It kind of lets you know around when those due dates will be. Now, what we're going to do differently with these this semester, and I think this will benefit you guys. So I'm not an idiot. And I know that if I give you these, you're just going to copy and paste the questions into, well, not all of them, but you're going to copy and paste into what? AI had to give you a response, right? I mean, it's just what you're going to do. I would have done the same thing. Now, it's a broader discussion outside of this class, and it doesn't apply as much when we have in-class exams. But, you know, the expected use of AI, if you're told explicitly not to use it on assignment, this class is not the same as everyone. Some of them, it's any use they'll consider academic dishonesty, and they can give you a 0. They detect that. I am taking an alternate stance, which is I don't want you to use it for quizzes, which I didn't mention this before, but that means every quiz I'm going to put a lockdown browser on, so you can't access any other web pages while you're taking these quizzes. For the Canvas discussions, I'm actually going to incorporate AI into the assignments. So I will give you different prompts or tell me what was your prompt to AI in order to answer this question. What we're going to do a lot with these Canvas discussions is then say, okay, given what response I got from AI, let's start to critique that. Does it look like what the models we've talked about in class would predict, right? Because AI can get things wrong. What do they call them? Hallucinations, I think is the term. It also, depending on how specific you are on your prompt, will pull from things outside of the level of difficulty of this course, or if you don't do it right, could even pull from things beneath the difficulty level of this course. So we're going to use it in these assignments, but also evaluate it. And then when I have you respond to other students, you're essentially going to be like evaluating their evaluation. Or some of these assignments will have you compare the response you got to theirs, maybe stating which generative AI tool you use, and see that there are some differences even in the generative AI that you do use. So these I used to kind of, and a lot of professors use these to like get some hypothetical kind of discourse. I'm still doing that, but part of the discourse I want to build into this class is not just the concepts we're covering, but AI, right? And this class isn't specific to AI, but most of you are college students. If you don't use generative AI when you get out into the workforce, you're an idiot, right? You're putting yourself at a competitive disadvantage to anyone who is using it. Now, and I shouldn't say things like that, but what will be true is if you don't know how to use it correctly, it may not be as an advantage to you, right? So I think really every professor should start teaching you how to use those generative AI tools in their specific field, right? Because we need to be able to evaluate it. We need to be able to learn how to use it more efficiently, catering our prompts and things like that to make sure we're getting more accurate information for the answers we want. And so I'm going to incorporate those in these Canvas discussions. Now, once I post the first one, so we're a couple of weeks out from that, I'll kind of go through what these actually look like show you the actual first assignment. And I've probably gotten the soapbox here and spent a little bit more time than I needed to here. But I think it's you know, the use of AI is kind of important to help you guys move forward. Okay? Any questions? It's one of these things I got in a roll. Okay. So we're also going to have weekly class readings. So this first week's a little bit different because I wasn't going to assign anything before we met day 1. From every single week here on out, I'm going to assign a module reading that's on that e-text top hat. So if you look at that e-text, it'll have like it's essentially a module or chapter. You'll read through it and there's embedded questions. They are not meant to be difficult. In fact, I give you 3 attempts at every single question. Some of them are like a forward or answer multiple choice. If you're putting any, small amount of effort in, you can get those answers correct, right? So I'm not expecting that you read through this line by line, but I am expecting you kind of skim a paragraph or 2 before each of these questions, are able to kind of get these questions correct. And I don't think you're going to have a perfect understanding of the material after reading this, but I know that your brain has been primed for the next topic we're going to cover. So I know it might seem like, how am I supposed to answer questions before the company class? They're not meant to be difficult. You have three, you know, attempts in every single question. These are really, most people, as long as they get them completed, are getting 95, sometimes even higher percent on this, right, on average. So make sure, so I'm going to sign these Wednesday after class. They are due the Sunday night before we have class the following week. So that the reason why is because I want to make sure you completed it before we start class the following day. Now, I say it's due at 10:59 here. It's technically due at 10:50 because I need some buffering time for it to sync up to Canvas. Hopefully, you're not waiting that late to get them completed, but technically the due dates there are at 11:50. Okay, they will show up on Canvas as 11:59. It's 11:50 p.m. at night on Sundays. Each one is just worth 2 points here, so it's a really small percentage of your overall grade. But once again, these can make a big difference when it comes to those you're on the cutoff. Okay. So we won't have one this week. All right. The first one will be assigned after class Wednesday. It'll be for module 2. All right. So I'll assign it Wednesday. It will be due at the end of the day this Sunday. And then kind of rinse and repeat. Right. Repeat that for the rest of the semester. With the exception of around those exam dates, we won't really have any material that week, so we won't have a module. So in total, we'll have 11. I'll drop your lowest in a module reading at the end of the semester, kind of similar to those quizzes. It's not going to show up on Canvas until we get to the end of the semester and I'll drop the lowest. But you'll be able to see this going into the final. If you haven't, or if you have to re-register for Top Hat because I had to resync the roster, you can just kind of go here to this link. Basically, I mean, if I try to log in, so we're going to log in here. You'll basically look for IU, type Indiana. So log in with your school account. So really anything in this class, if you're really anything for other classes, you probably should be using your IU credentials. So this will be your IU username and kind of a password or passphrase. Once you kind of log in, the reason why you need to do that is so it kind of syncs your account between Top Hat and Canvas. But once you do that, it's pretty straightforward. It'll ask you like what course you want to join. You'll search for ECON B251, fundamentals of business economics. Or if it asks you simply for a join code, this is the code that you'll use. Okay? This gets you into our specific course. Now, I'm also going to add that first week's module reading onto Canvas, which is just for review. So it's not actually worth any points. But if you just click on that link instead, it should send you directly to this course's Top Hat. So that's probably the easier way to do it. And then it'll still prompt you for this join code. But if you go there through Canvas, if I remember, I don't think it'll ask you to sign with your IU credentials since you're accessing it already, being signed in. So that's kind of how you'll get enrolled for Top Hat. Obviously, you'll have to have, if you haven't already paid for it. Generally, this is sometimes already paid for, depending on what your kind of financial situation is, or your grants that pay for it. If you haven't already, you're going to enter your payment information here. It's relatively low compared to other textbooks. So this is one of the reasons why I use it. And if you need extra help, there's more detailed outline specific to Top Hat. If you have any questions in this process, please reach out as soon as possible. Try to get this done today. All right. So if you have any issues registering, you can identify them. We can get them worked out before really next Monday, right? That's in the first, sorry, before next Sunday. That's when the first assignment will be due. Okay? So you'll have that kind of test assignment for module 1 up there, so you can try to start accessing that. That we look here. I've already got. Yep, so I've already got it kind of setting here, that module 1 basic economics. If you click that, open your window, that would take you to Top Hat. So just another way of kind of get there to kind of log on and get your Top Hat registration set up. That's the way it will be logged. There we go. Any questions on that? Yeah.
Is the first like module and the first quiz due this Sunday, this Monday, or the following Sunday?
Yep. So the first module reading for module 2 is assigned after class this Wednesday, right? Because it's due before we start covering module 2 next week. The first quiz once we cover module one quiz this or material this week, it'll be assigned and then due the end of the day next month. Yep. So we're starting off quickly. Any other questions? So,
We'll go back to the first code.
oh, yeah. Oh, where was it? There you go. Other questions? Yep. Slides sometime. Yep. So you go to Canvas right now. This is the first set of slides. And those will always be posted. Really, I'll post module 2 after class on Wednesday, so they're always going to get well before.
Your open-ended questions seem to be like unanswerable.
Yes, so you should be able to answer them. They're just opinion based, a lot of them, right? So if you're having issues with it, technically we can talk about it after class. But those open-ended ones, you should be able to respond. It might be an issue with your browser or device, but yeah, there a lot of those. Some of the questions in Top Hat are simply for answering them. They're not even. There's no correct answer. Any other questions for you? Okay. All right. So the other thing that I mentioned already are these in-class quizzes that we're going to use to kind of essentially represent your attendance, right? So every single class, I'm going to have these like Canvas quizzes. You won't be able to see them on Canvas until I'm in class and I publish them. So once I publish it in class, a lot of the times I'll give you a join code, make sure that you're in class when you're doing it. You'll then usually have about 5 to 10 minutes. It'll generally have 2-3 questions over material that we've covered up to that point in class. A lot of the times it is towards the end of class. Sometimes it will be at the beginning. Sometimes it will be in the middle, right? So it's going to be kind of random time depending on what we cover that day, where I want to put them or use them in class. But I'm only going to release them once we're in class, give you that join code, and then you'll have a little bit of class time to come work. These are meant to be kind of a little bit easier. In fact, some days if I'm feeling nice, I might work through 1 or 2 of them with you and then kind of only have you work on one of them on your own. They are not meant to be difficult points. They are meant to be points that you can primarily, once again, similar to module readings, get well above 90% as long as you're in class and not sleeping, right? So we're going to have one every single day, with the exception of this first week, right? And with the exception of the weeks where we have exams. We won't have one on exam day. And those exam weeks, the class right before the exam, I always kind of have that like open. So we're just going to be doing a review. No new material that day before class before the exam, just review that day. So that gives us a total of what? I think I said, I've got 24 class periods here. I'm going to drop your 4 lowest at the end of the semester. So I always kind of view these essentially as you have built-in sick days. So don't think that you can just skip 4 classes because I don't excuse kind of minor absences. Right? This is my way of not having to ask you for a note that someone you love died. Right? So these are your built-in sick days or personal days, just like hopefully once all of you are here, your job. Right? You can't call off work and you're going to pay. Right? So this is my kind of way of building in those sick days for you throughout the semester. Now, if something does happen, there's extenuating circumstances, you're going to be out for like 2 weeks. You know, like I don't know, developing pneumonia, physically can't get to class for 2 weeks. Obviously, we can work something out. Anytime you have these extenuating circumstances, there I will need documentation of the whatever the illness or scenario is. But for the most part, these kind of 1 day missings of class for minor illness, personal reasons, those are going to be one of these 4 built-in days that I drop at the semester. Any questions on that? Okay, so round out a little bit here. We'll get through a little bit of material today. So I've got a TA for this course, so I put their name and email. So basically, they're going to, if you have questions, what I would hope you generally do is email them first. If they can't answer the question, they would then forward it to me and I'll kind of give you a response. I only say to do this because I like to get quick responses, but my other sections other than this one are like 200 plus people. So I get a lot of emails, so it's sometimes answered from the TA for this section a little bit quicker than you might think. But always feel free to email me as well. Like I said, I'm generally pretty quick, especially if it's like a small minor question. If it's like a content related question that might take a longer email, that's where emailing the TA might be a little bit more prevalent. I also put up kind of that course YouTube page, just so you can kind of, if you miss a class, you can always go back and get an imperfect substitute. Once again, it's going to have me talking. It's going to have what's up here on the screen. But for example, what I'll do a lot of the times is when we cover something, I'll switch over to the dot cam. I'll do some work here. This does not get captured in the Zoom recording, right? So this is an incentive to be in class. Because this will be a lot of the stuff, like it's important to me working through problems and kind of giving you nice visualizations where I don't do as much of that in slides. So there we go. Another thing I want to mention here, and I'll go a little more in depth into this probably on Wednesday, maybe not until next Tuesday, or sorry, next. Also, if I say Thursdays, call me up. I'm used to teaching Tuesday, Thursday, so this is the rare time I have this class on Monday, Wednesday. But hopefully I have more information either this Wednesday or next Monday. So all this is kind of TBD. This slide will get changed by the end of the week. So I'm going to have these collaborative learning sessions every single week. And they're going to be Thursday and Monday nights. Now these times are for sure, like guaranteed. The locations are likely the locations they're going to be in. There's a couple of them where the walk between them is really long for my CL leaders, the people leading these sessions. So I'm trying to get those changed. I forget which two. I think it's this location might get updated, but I'll mention that if I do. So right now, this is kind of a tentative times and locations. The days won't change, the times won't change, but the locations might a little bit by the end of the week, right? Now what these are supposed to do, I think these are like, I wish I had, I mean, every course would be great if they had a resource like this. But I have undergraduates who have taken this course and got an A or better, right? So they, or A minus or better. So they did very well, and they're going to lead these sessions. So what I'm going to do every single week, I'm going to give you a set of practice problems. So right now, go to Canvas. I've actually got them sitting there. I'll release them after class today. I just didn't want to overwhelm people by thinking they have to go through these files. It's basically going to be a set of practice questions to get you ready for that first quiz. And I'll do that every single week. So you'll have these practice problems to be able to work through. They should look pretty similar to the quizzes that you're going to see every week. Now, what the collaborative learning sessions will be, even though I give you an answer key here, like you can't really rote memorize in this class. And so a lot of it's going to be, well, how did I, kind of similar to AI, right? I have this question, I get this response, but I need to understand what's happening in the middle. I need to understand how I'm getting to that correct answer. I need to know what the process is. So these collaborative learning sessions, what these undergraduates who are leading them will do, essentially give them solutions files, and they would work through these problems just like I would for you if I had more time in class. So I think they're very helpful. People that start to attend them typically attend them for the entire semester. People that don't start, like, don't realize the actual value they have, and they'll like pick up halfway through the semester and they're like, why wasn't I doing this every single week? It helps me so much with the quizzes, but it's also helping me learn the material better for once I get to those exams. So I would highly suggest taking advantage of these once we get going. I also offer a kind of small amount of extra credit. So I think it's each one I have being worth like 0.25 percentage points, which seems like nothing. But if you go to every single, or sorry, I think it's 0.125, sorry. But if you go to every single week, that's going to be a total of 1.5 points. I mean, that once again, if you're on the cutoff, that can turn a B plus into an A minus. So every single week, it's just what, 0.125 points, seems like nothing. But if you go to every single one, that adds up to 1.5 percentage points that goes towards your final exam. You just added it. So I did 89, I did 90.5. So a little bit of incentive to attend these. Once again, I'm really only doing this because I know how valuable they can be. It's not just this small amount of extra credit that's going to benefit you. It's actually attending them and seeing these problems work through that's really going to be the benefit. That's what's going to help you get a lot more points that are weighted a lot more into your grade on those. And then I have a link up here. This is like I think some of it's free, but I think this is like mostly like paid tutoring. Once again, I will resort to that until like my last resort, like these are free. And these are free to attend. That's what else is free to attend, my office hours. I think I've got that in a separate slide in a little bit, but always feel free as you're working through things to come by office hours. But this is a really good resource. And they don't start this week, they won't start until next week. So they'll start with module 2 material, which will be next Thursday and the following Monday. So this is why I kind of, even though I'm putting the quiz out like one day later than what we covered in class, I'm giving you to the end of the day the following Monday instead of Sunday, so that if you want to, you could still, if Thursdays don't work well, you could still attend these Monday CL sessions and still kind of prepare yourself to take those quizzes that way. Questions on this?
When will the locations of the conference be posted?
So these are tentatively where they'll be. 2 of them may change. I am hoping this is not completely up to me. So I'm waiting on a response over whether or not I can get those locations changed, just so that they're kind of more centralized. I will let you know as soon as I have, if I do get those, and I can update that file. Okay. All right, so this is kind of a catch-all. I just, I want to set us up for this semester. So this course is not meant to be political in nature at all. But we're going to be discussing a variety of different issues that can be made political, right? So what our goal is when we're looking at these things, and we might even talk about government actions. We're not trying to evaluate what's right or wrong, right? What we're trying to evaluate is what are the effects of these different decisions made either by the government or by individuals, right? And why might, given different political leanings, we might see the behaviors of individuals change. Right? So we will talk about things like, public policies of taxing cigarettes, subsidizing the use of other things. I've got, why do people kind of make the decision to litter versus not? Structures of different governments, so capitalism versus communism. Seems political, but no, we're just analyzing what those economic systems look like. So specifically when it comes to those campus discussions, just remember, like, let's be civil, right? And even though those responses shouldn't be as much opinion-based as rooted in the concepts that we're covering in class. And there is no right or wrong answer sometimes, especially in those campus discussions. So try to be civil. Having that back and forth, really, if you challenge your own ideas, seeing what other people's responses are, it really should give you either A, open your eyes up to something new, or B, maybe it solidifies, the stance that you already have. So that's kind of my way of saying, if we dive into these issues and they start to seem personal, but we're not trying to dive into what side is right or wrong. We're just trying to evaluate. So I've got some important dates up here. I already mentioned the exams and the final, but the withdrawal date and then our ad drop deadline, which is the end of this week. So if you're still kind of adjusting your schedule, that hopefully I don't lose any of you by the end of the week, but just to have some important dates to keep in mind, not just for this class, that ad drop and withdrawal deadline apply to any 16-week course that takes. So how do I summarize? How do you be successful in this class? And it looks like we'll have a little bit of time. We're going to dive into just a little bit of material to start us out this week. So get those module readings done before class, right? It primes your brain. It's easy points. Show up to class. Once again, start missing too many classes, you can fall behind very quickly in this class because, like I said earlier, everything's comprehensive. Everything builds on itself. So you miss a week of class, it's going to be difficult to kind of catch up. And those in-class quizzes are also pretty easy points. Practice, practice, practice. So when it comes to the assessments like the 30-minute exams, I didn't mention this earlier, but just like the quizzes will give you practice problems, I'll give you a set of practice problems for the exam a week in advance. So working through any practice problems I give you, those questions are meant to be very representative of what you see on that next assessment, whether it's for a quiz or an exam. So those are really important to kind of work through them early. Make sure if you have questions, you can ask them during the CL sessions. You ask them in my office hours. And I may not mention this for those collaborative learning sessions. I give them the solutions to work through those questions, but if you have like, well, what if this changed? You can always ask those at those times, right? It's not specific, like they're only gonna work through the way, the way this problem's exactly working. You can kind of ask them questions, kind of answer that as well. Take those Canvas quizzes seriously, right? Got a lot of resources available to you for those quizzes, your notes, right? I can't police it. Technically, you can work with another student, right? So take those seriously, try to get as many points as possible there, because the exams, you're not gonna have all the resources available to you. So you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? Make sure you're kind of doing all of these things that you can outside of the exams to kind of help give you a good base for if you don't do as well on the exams as you wanted. It's not gonna hurt your grade as much if you did done well in these other categories. Also, like missed quizzes, missed module, like those zeros start to pull your grade down very quickly. So even if it's like, I don't know, let's say it's Monday at 11:30, you're like, oh, I gotta get this quiz done. Just get on, even if you guess, you get like 25% of the questions right, it's gonna be a lot better than the zero, right? No, don't do that, right? You shouldn't, but I'm just making the point that like those zeros will kill your grade. So that goes any class of the whole class. So also, I've got my TA, their office hours, I'm still solidifying. So if you look at the syllabus, I think it says TBD still on what their office hours will be. I'm slowly getting those in this week. Those should be updated in the syllabus and in the slides. I'll add them in what those office hours are. Excuse me, as soon as they get back. Okay, and I gave them all kind of the deadline at the end of this week, just to kind of see like what their schedule is and what's going to kind of work for them the best. But we will have a TA you can reach out to. Also, always feel free to reach out to me. Like I have office hours Monday, Wednesday from 8 to 11, so I know we're a little bit early, right? But I like to pride myself on like I try to be very available. Even if those office hours don't work for you, like send me an email. We can sometimes set up a meeting by appointment. If like I just can't get in this Wednesday, you have 15, 20 minutes here in this time block. My schedule is what it is, so I can't always guarantee I can carve out a time that specific week, but I will try to. But for the most part, these office hours are going to be one where I can guarantee I'm available week to week. And I encourage all of you to stop by. It's one of the parts of my job that I enjoy. And getting up and talking in front of you and kind of seeing some of the light bulb stuff it's nice. Right? But having that one-on-one interaction, helping people work through things, I really find that enjoyable. So I don't want to be sitting around my office all morning sitting waiting. All right, so make sure you're stopping by. If you have any questions, you kind of want to work through things, this will be the same episode. Oh, I forgot to mention, you can stop by physically, or I have a Zoom link that I will have open during that entire time block. And then as people like log on to it, I can kind of work with you over Zoom. It's sometimes a little bit clunkier that way, but it is an option that I always have available at office hours. These questions, and then how many of you guys are questions? All right. So I'm in Wiley Hall, which is, I think that way. I forget exactly where I'm at in the building, but it's pretty close. It's like you guys gonna balance and it's like you head towards there and just curve up to the right, going uphill. It's a little brick building at the top. So we've got what we go till 3:35. So I might get class done a little bit early here today, but I want to at least start to dive into kind of that first module. So admittingly, that first quiz, every question, some of the questions will come from the syllabus, and about half of them will come from the material we covered today and on Wednesday. So what is the base definition of economics? So it's essentially how individuals or companies make decisions, right, based on facing scarce resources, right, or limited resources. We then will kind of evaluate how those decisions will then impact markets, impact society. Now, we'll also kind of let you know as we move forward. When I give you definition stuff, a lot of these quite like those questions, it's not going to be like, what is the definition for, right? So I'll go through those a little bit quicker because we want to get kind of to the meat on the bone. It's like, how do we apply this? So, for example, why if you're making a decision to buy your ideal car, right? let's just say mine was like a 78 Trans Am, like completely refurbished, like redone, right? Why don't I go out and buy that car? Why wouldn't you go out and buy your ideal car? Maybe you wouldn't get, some kind of Jeep Wrangler. Yeah,
It's not like financially ideal, like,
you don't have enough money, right? You have your college students, you have a scarce resource of dollars in your pocket, right? And so really what we're kind of looking at is, well, people aren't able to do things sometimes because they do face scarce resources. Why, as a company, am I not producing 1,000 more units today? Because I only have so many workers facing a scarce resource, right? So that's essentially like the base of everything we're looking at in economics. People, companies, countries making decisions within scarce or limited resources, right? So what that leads to is, well, if I only have $1,000, I have to start picking and choosing what I am buying. Okay? Or I have to figure out kind of, if there's scarcity of resources, where am I allocating my time? Where am I allocating my money? Where am I allocating my workers if I'm a company? And every time I choose to do something, so if I send a worker over to this part of my plant to, I don't know, build, start step one of the production, I can't use them to do another part, or another step in that production process. If I go out and I buy lunch, well, I can't take that money and also buy, I don't know, a movie ticket. It's a movie anymore, right? But like these simple examples, when I start to use this scarce resource, I'm making trade-offs. Once I use it for one thing, I can't use it for another. Okay? So this leads us to like next class, we'll start talking about when we make these decisions, we have cost of the decision. We're not doing something else. We'll end up calling that an opportunity cost. So we're also, for this course, just to kind of get through this, so we've got macro and microeconomics. This course doesn't specifically say microeconomics, but really after module 2, the majority of what we're going to be covering, the topics will be microeconomics, right? So macroeconomics is more like the study of the economy as a whole, where we're a lot of times comparing countries, comparing different states, like much larger things than an individual. So we'll talk about, take B252, we start to talk about things like inflation, the money supply, interest rates, whereas we're really going to focus on firm, household, individual level decisions. So we're going to really most of the semester other than module 2, which module 2 isn't purely macroeconomics. It's like macro, it would apply to both macroeconomics and microeconomic courses. In fact, B251 would go through very similar material at the very beginning. But we're really going to focus on microeconomics. Right? So, I don't know, I try to use these terrible memes and things like this in class, where we're going to focus on microeconomics. Okay? Now, one thing that's kind of, one reason why I find microeconomics much more interesting is because macroeconomics is like the study of what a country is doing. That can't really be applied to much else than what countries are doing. When we look at microeconomic issues, individual choice, that can be applied to a variety of different sectors. So you can look at like healthcare decisions. You can look at labor market, right? Worker decisions. I mentioned, I think earlier, and I don't always this because I don't want to turn people on, but like you can apply it to sports, right? You can apply it to some people who do things with like gaming, right? Where you can take individual decisions like video games, like online gaming, right? So you really can take microeconomic principles and apply it to a variety of different topics. And I'll try to kind of sprinkle these in throughout the semester. We'll primarily focus on things that are related to like consumer behavior, because that's what companies care about. But I'll drop in some things along the way that kind of show you the scope of which these microeconomic principles can be applied to. So when we're thinking about individual decision making, people make decisions out of both their self-interest, but they could also be making decisions out of the social interest, right? So what we're going to assume is that every person that we're talking about, whether that's a consumer, someone buying something, someone working for a firm, or the people that are making decisions that are kind of leading these firms, they're all doing it out of self-interest. Now, you might think, okay, people are making the decisions and they're going to make themselves better off. Why do we have non-profit organizations, not-for-profit? What is their self-interest? They get value in helping other people, right? So at the end of the day, they're still making a self-interest decision because the thing that brings them happiness or benefits them is helping other individuals. Right? So it doesn't violate this assumption that people or companies are making self-interest decisions. Now, everybody's self-interest might be different. Why does someone go to the gym 10 hours a week versus not at all? Right? Well, those two people have a very different enjoyment, or they have different scarce resources. I have a 2-year-old son, so things like going to the gym don't exist for me, right? So we're still thinking people are taking their scarce resources, time and money, and making self-interested rational decisions. Okay? So more money, more time, more happiness. Why might this not be good for society? We don't have people who get joy from helping others, because if I'm driving down the road and I don't really care about the environment, I might toss trash out the window. That's my self-interest. So what happens to the social interest if everybody does that? We end up with lakes looking like this, right? So we'll kind of analyze throughout the semester why self-interested decisions might not be what's best for society, and how we could use government tools to maybe push us towards those the most socially beneficial outcomes. So when it comes to making these decisions, I said, if I take my time and I devote it towards something, I can't take that time block and do something else with it. Or if I take the $10 I have in my pocket and I go and buy lunch, I don't have that $10 to do other things with now. So what we're going to call the fact that I've used this resource and I no longer have it available, or the things that I can no longer buy, or the things I can no longer do with my time, or essentially that's the opportunity cost of whatever I bought or whatever I used my time for. So we're going to call this an opportunity cost. So an opportunity cost is essentially when I use my money to do something, or I use my time to do something, the next best alternative, or the thing I would have valued the next highest, that's what I'm giving up. That's my opportunity cost of the decision that I've made. Okay? So if a firm takes all of its workers to produce, I don't know, so popcorn, right? Well, what are they not producing in their production facility? Potato chips, right? Their opportunity cost is how much money they're giving up by producing popcorn instead of if they produced and sold potato chips. So kind of a good example there, but that is, it's very applicable, right? You have a production facility, they can produce either one. So, if you think about going out to lunch, if I choose to go out and get lunch somewhere, if I go to Chipotle, my opportunity cost is how much I would have valued, right, going to eat at Chipotle. If I'm a self-interest rational individual, I chose the one that I like the most, right? So, another one I always think about, like, I don't know, people aren't using this app as much. I feel like other social media apps, if I basically start to replace it. But whatever, you doom scroll on your phone through all these social media apps, what's the opportunity cost? Well, whatever I could have been doing with that time, right? Other things that I could have been doing with that time or what I'm giving up, or the next highest value. So what else I could have been doing with that time? Another example I like to give is let's say I could work a shift if I have a job, but instead there's some artists I really want to go to their concert, so I have to call off work. But what was the opportunity cost of going to that concert? Even if it was completely free. In fact, I'm kind of an IndyCar fan a little bit, and they just had a free race in DC, right? Tickets were completely free. But if I flew out, let's just say I was already there, I didn't have to spend any money, I could just go there and watch this race. Well, what was my opportunity cost? Well, if I had to call off work, all that money I could have made, right? So even though the ticket was free, making that decision still imposed a cost to me. It wasn't completely free. Because the time I took to go do this event, go to a free concert, what was I giving up? All of the money I could have made work. Well, this is the idea. In economics, you might kind of see this phrase pop up. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Anytime something is free, it really just doesn't, if the ticket is free, I'm still giving up, right? Not doing something with that time. I still always have an opportunity cost. Nothing is completely free. Because if we factor in these opportunity costs, every decision we make, we're not using that money to do something else. We're not using that time to do something else. We will always have an opportunity cost. So, no free lunch, we'll get the cheese of the mouse and never cost of them. So, I think here, just based on where we're at time-wise, we need to what, 3:35. I'll talk through a few more things here. I think this should give us plenty of time to cover the rest of these slides on Wednesday's class. So couple, I mean, we're not doing it out right this second, but I have some other things I want to touch on before we have class today. So we'll cover the rest of really module 1 material on Wednesday. I imagine we usually have a little bit of time at the end. So I'm going to start module 2. Now, the reading is still just due by the end of the day Sunday before we really get into module 2 next Monday. But I might start it just to kind of save us a little bit of time next week to dive deeper into some of the more complex concepts that are in that module. But we should be able to work the rest of module 1 slides. That first quiz, once again, I mentioned earlier, I think it's got 14 questions, and I believe 6, just under half of them are over the syllabus, and the remaining ones will be things we talked about today, but most of what we cover on Wednesday's class. This first week's quiz is probably a little bit easier than the ones moving forward, and those syllabus questions, they're in the slides, but also should be things that are pretty easy to find when you're taking those. If you've got the slides printed out, you've got your notes. So this first quiz is a good time to help pull that average quiz grade up. So it should be a little bit easier. So other than that, I did want to give you an idea about what this first quiz will look like. So I'm just going to publish this just so you can kind of see this is going to pop up on Canvas. So usually week to week, under this assignments, I'll kind of add in these daily quizzes. So once this is available, like what would this look like? So we're going to do a test quiz on Wednesday's class, right? But moving forward, the only ones that are for points start next week, right? Those in-class quizzes. So I have this one set to be 0 points, right? So it's just a testing that will kind of make sure everyone can get on and access Canvas in class and that it works okay on Wednesday. So I'll usually pull it open. It looks something like this. I got the due date kind of set here. You can kind of ignore the time here for a second. I'll have it specific to this section. Go to build. This is what it looked like when we're in class. I'll quickly go to settings. I'll show you the access code, right? I'll have this time limit, depending on what we talk, maybe I'll make it a bit longer. I always like to kind of have a default set. I would then kind of hit return. And then I like order I usually will do is I'll do that and then I'll publish it, right? So then you can then pull it up, right? Once it's published and then you can see it on Canvas. And then I'll go down here. I'll preview it. You can see the answers, and you'll kind of have these questions. Now, on Thursdays, I'm going to go through this. It's not for any points, but I am going to want to get some information from you. So I've got like a couple questions that we'll kind of use on Wednesday's class. Once again, some for any points just to make sure that we can have these working so that we get in class on next Monday. We can actually start using those. Is that clear what I'm saying there? The other thing I want to work with what we got here today. So to kind of round out, hopefully this was nice syllabus is, first day class, so just kind of making sure we're setting up expectations for the semester. All right, we're going to move quickly in this, right, in this class. So I said earlier, it's comprehensive. So you start missing things early on, you're going to get behind very quickly. Right? So we're going to start moving really quick. Wednesday's class, right in material, no more syllabus days, right? Starting Wednesday. So make sure you're not falling behind, right? Especially early on. That, like I said, module 3 specifically is the building block of everything else we do for the rest of the semester. Right? So making sure we have a good grasp on module 1 and 2 so that we can really get a good grasp on module 3 is going to be important for the rest of the semester. Okay, so we'll start out very quick. This is my son, right? We're at the track there. A lot of things are going to feel alien, right? So although you might have had an economics course before, we're likely going to dive into things that you haven't seen yet, right? But we're going to be applying things in a slightly different way, right? So don't feel like you always have to understand things, especially if you go through the module readings, you then show up in class, you're like, I know what's going on. You get in the class, you're like, damn, I was wrong. Right? Everything's not going to come natural at first, which is why I want you to use the resource of those collaborative learning sessions. I want you to email me or stop by office hours. And everything's not going to come naturally. And that's every course, but I think especially this one, things are just going to look a lot different than what you've already done. Like we'll use math, but it's in a very different way than like a algebra class. Even though we're using algebra, it's very different in how we're applying. Sometimes it'll feel like you're drinking from a water hose, right? There's going to be a lot of information, right? We're going to cover a lot of content. Once again, how do you make sure you're working through that? Use these extra resources outside of class. Also, I can't stress enough, similar to falling behind quickly, also kind of grasp. You gotta show up in class, right? I get that it's easy. You guys don't have it. It's an 8 a.m. course excuse, right? So make sure you're getting here. It makes your anything you do outside of class, studying through that, it increases the effectiveness of it a ton, right? And so once again, if I correlate attendance in class, even if I take out the points that it's worth, it's highly correlated with some exams. So I'm not just making this up. And then it's okay to not understand things at first, right? We're not going to get everything right away. This kind of goes back to, some things when you're alien, like, it's okay if you don't get it right away, right? What's another way that kind of helps with this? Working through those practice problems, right? You might think you have a good grasp on a concept, and when you actually go to apply it to working through some of these problems or questions, you're like, I don't really get this. Like Professor Landis was talking about it, made complete sense. When I go to apply this question, I don't get it. Right. So that's okay, right? That's why I give you these practice problem sets. So I want you to work through these problems, right? Because that act in and of itself is going to help you learn. And even the quizzes, a really good thing to do before the exams, or even right after you take the quizzes. And I say right after, I don't have the date or the answers set to release until after the due date. But once that due date passes, go on and review your quiz question. Once that due date passes, you can see what the correct answers are. Rework those problems, especially the ones you got wrong. Okay. But then also, more important, right? You guys are freshmen in college. Take your courses seriously. You should also be yourselves a little bit. All right. I just go back to remember when I was a freshman, like a lot of things that want to do well, get this high expectation, and Kelly get out of here, get this awesome job. You still can do that, right? But if all you're doing is working, you're not going to have a very well-rounded life. You're actually going to be a lot less efficient in some of that time where you take some breaks, right? Take some things where you kind of clear your mind. I see some students where they just like, all they do is classes and they just get burned out. And actually that's a pretty low. So anyways, so have some fun. Enjoy your semester. My office hours won't start until next week. But to be completely honest, I will be there from 8 to 11 this week on Wednesday morning. So if you want to stop by, you can. Otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to ask after class. And I will see you guys on Wednesday. I'll make sure I'm in the right room with you.